Welcome back to the Chambers Music Studio podcast, A Musical Life, where we talk about creativity, music education, and the role music can play in shaping confident, creative people. One of the questions we hear pretty often from families is, what happens if my child loses interest in their instrument? Or sometimes, do we have to stop lessons if they're not practicing as much? Raise your hand if you've thought that, or had a student say that, or just kind of wondered. Today I want to talk about something important. Music lessons are about much more than mastering a single instrument. They're really about developing creativity, confidence, focus, and a lifelong relationship with music. At Chambers Music Studio, we call this Life at Chambers, the experience of growing as a musician and as a person through music. The problem many families face: almost every student reaches a moment where their motivation changes. Maybe they get busy with sports, school gets more demanding, they feel stuck on a skill, or they simply want to try something new. And many families assume that this means it's time to stop music lessons altogether. But in reality, those moments can be opportunities, not endings. Music is incredibly flexible. Instead of stopping, sometimes the best approach is simply changing how a student engages with music. I'll be right back with that after I mention Chambers Music Studio is the sponsor of this podcast. We have 3 locations in Bexley, Columbus, and Worthington. And we have a planned, structured pathway of music education for you and your family, including many fun events like a summer immersive experience, as in a music summer camp or a music summer institute or academy. So definitely check out those things from us later after this podcast so you can see what other options you have that would really be a nice creative experience for you. Now, back to my points. Music is bigger than one instrument. One thing we emphasize at Chambers Music Studio is that being a musician doesn't mean you only play one instrument forever. Musicians often explore different instruments, join ensembles, learn songwriting, experiment with different styles. This is actually how musicians grow. If a student starts on piano but becomes curious about voice, drums, or guitar, that curiosity is a great sign. It means their musical identity is developing. And when students are allowed to explore, they often reconnect with their motivation in a powerful way. Now, I've got some creative ways to stay engaged in music. And one is you could try a few different instruments. Maybe one at Chambers Music Studio, if you miss a lesson, you can often use those makeup tokens for a different instrument to just test it out and experience. A piano student might really enjoy joining a drum lesson or our drum ensemble, which is very fun and an interactive way to practice rhythm. A singer could really deepen their musicianship through piano. And that's why we often recommend most kids go through our early childhood program to develop a lot of musicianship skills before their private lessons. Each instrument experience strengthens musical understanding in a different way. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but joining a group or ensemble would really increase that momentum and reignite that excitement. So we have several at the studio. We have a couple groups of ensembles. We do have a drum ensemble and 2 kind of like a rock band ensemble. They're kind of a mix, rock, pop, kind of classic hits like that. Piano ensemble. Any summer program that we do music-wise would be a great opportunity to join a group. You learn a lot when you play with others, like listening skills, collaboration, confidence. And then music becomes more social, which sometimes is what's missing just in the private lesson. And that's truly why we created our jam band program as well for those early childhood education students in ages 4 and 5 up to 6, because the social aspect really helps keep that motivation and momentum. And when you're playing with other musicians, that's really a great way to inspire students and make them feel like a musician themselves. Now, a third option would be explore creative music skills. Music isn't only about reading notes. Students can explore songwriting, improvisation, composition, music production, and those skills really help students feel ownership over music, which helps keep them engaged long term. I mentioned this already. What do I mean by life at Chambers? At Chambers Music Studio, we talk a lot about life at Chambers and what that means. And it's really just that music lessons here are about more than weekly instruction. They're about being part of a creative environment where students grow over time. Students build confidence, creativity, focus, persistence. They develop relationships with teachers and other students. They perform, collaborate, and celebrate progress. Over time, they stop thinking of themselves as someone who takes lessons and start thinking of themselves as musicians. And that shift is powerful because when students develop that identity, music becomes something they carry with them for life. And I've talked about this a lot in the past, long-term benefits of music education. The research consistently shows that music education supports stronger focus and attention, cognitive development, emotional expression, creativity, discipline, and perseverance. But just as importantly, music becomes something students can return to throughout their lives. So it's really important that we think of the benefits of music when we're taking it and ride that wave. If something feels like uninspiring, let's add one of these other options to kind of reignite the experience. Keep them in lessons, keep them in music education. Enroll them in an ensemble or a music camp or a performance. The long-term benefits outweigh the short-term aspect of sometimes in the moment people find it, I can't keep going right now. We just need to change something. We just need to change something up. And so that's the real goal, that they learn enough in music right now that when they grow up, they can be adults that come back to music whenever they need to. So if you're already part of Chambers Music Studio and your child ever hits a moment where motivation shifts, remember, that doesn't mean the musical journey has to stop. Please, I really want to emphasize this. It's not recommended to take breaks in music education. It's actually recommended if something is feeling like interest is dropping, that we shift gears a little bit and we double down on music and do something a little bit more, or maybe just change the time of day sometimes. So please don't give up on your musical journey just because there might be a little bit of what feels like, oh, we're not practicing as much, we're not as interested. Sometimes it simply means we need to approach it in a different way. Joining an ensemble, exploring different creative atmospheres in the lesson, trying a slightly different instrument, enrolling in a performance opportunity. The flexibility is a big part of what we call it life at Chambers, growing as musicians while building creativity, confidence, and a lasting relationship with music. We have a lot of options to keep it interesting so that people don't get bored or give up, if things don't feel stale. And if you're listening to the podcast but you haven't joined us yet, we'd love for you to experience Life at Chambers for yourself. You can learn more about our progress and our programs and find the right starting point at chambersmusicstudio.com. Thanks for being a part of this community. Thanks for listening.